Good evening, and welcome to another edition of African Americans Ain't Africans, the talk show that proves without a shadow of a doubt that the so called African American didn't find his way to America in the trunk of a ship. I'm your host, the Indigenous One, and tonight we're gonna hit a subject that we rarely ever talk about. This subject is always pushed up under the rug. We don't want to look at it, but it's gotten so prevalent in our communities now that this must be looked at seriously, because the more we go by and not look at it and see it for what it really is, it puts us in a horrible position. So tonight I'm gonna have the sister infused Virgo just give us a short account of what mental illness is in our communities and how does it present itself in our communities, because it's a major problem. And a lot of times we look at mental illness as only for poor people, people who are not that, into the culture. They're not weaved into the culture. And mental illness comes in all forms, and it hits in all areas of life. So Sis is going to share the information with us. We're not going to go through it all tonight because it's so much. We're just going to do it a little bit every week. But check out what she says about mental illness and see if you recognize some of the symptoms in the community as we go on. Infused Virgo, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for joining us. Yeah, the mental illness thing is a huge
Mm-hmm.
problem in the community. What would you explain mental illness as?
Well, from me, explaining mental illness would be something that hinders you from growth um, in regards to your being knowledge based. It has to do with your proper growth in regards to, how can I put it? To just in growing with your environment, being able to learn, being able to flourish, things that cause you to have insecurities, cause you to feel like you're not worthy. And your reaction from those treatments are what they are referring to, or what is referred to in the definition as being mental illness. Um, Within our community, we tend not to embrace mental illness or acknowledge mental illness as what it is, because we have the idea of what happens in this house stays in this house. And that is also a form of mental illness, because you're not allowing someone to develop properly. Mental illness is basically hindering your development in regards to different ways of thinking, of feeling your emotions. It can be with learning and so forth, but I'll go more into that as we go further.
Well, cool. Well, let's get started then.
Okay. All right, so go ahead to the next slide. I'm going to go through what I put together. Now, I just want to say at this as a disclaimer, I am not a psychologist. I'm not a doctor. I just like to do a lot of research and studying on different stuff. And with what's going on within our society and our community, I wanted to really start talking about this because it seems to be more prevalent now than ever. I mean, I personally, with looking at, like, with the COVID situation, looking at the presidential elections, for example, looking at things that have happened in the past, and we really need to start focusing on these things. There are things that happen within families that, once again, aren't talked about, that should be, because they're hindering and they're harming the children. They're honestly, right now within our community, the suicide rate among our youth is exceedingly high, and it's elevating. So that's one of the reasons why I'm looking at this as well.
So
So
are you saying the suicides are high because the children aren't mentally developing properly?
the suicides are high because the children are not mentally developing properly, and also because, just think for a second, like, if the children aren't developing properly, and then, like, you have for example, the stipulation or the stereotype that comes with us is single moms. So you have a single mom, she's stressed out, for example. I mean, use this stereotype, and she's stressed out. You know, dad is stressed out. Mom and dad are always arguing. You come home from school, and as you're walking home from school, when you could walk home from school, you see the police around the corner because someone's been shot. That's PTSD. You're stuck in the house. Now your parents have to homeschool you. They didn't finish school. They weren't good in school, so they don't know what they're doing. So instead of saying, hey, I don't know, parents get frustrated, and then they take it out on who? The children. This environment is not healthy for our children at all. So, hello, can you hear me?
I hear you fine.
Okay. So I would have to say, yeah, it is.
Oh, okay. So what is mental illness?
Mental illness has been classified as a wide range of conditions that affects mood, thinking, and behavior. It's also known as mental disorder. I'm going to go by my slides, but so you got to look at it from this standpoint. Mental illness are things that affect you being and existing and being able to think properly and being able to learn, like I said earlier. So it's all those things that are around your environment, as well as from your supposed support system, that when they're not there for you, that you're missing out on. You have to have that connection, and without being able to have that connection, this is what happens.
Just totally disconnected from everything, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so these are types of the mental disorders.
Right.
Okay, can you go through these?
Yeah, I can go through them. Let me pull them up here so I can see them. Okay, so basically, the disorders that are classified, that are listed, are neurodevelopment disorders, and a neurodevelopment disorder is like ADHD. That's what that's what, as I was researching, that it is listed under. Also things like spina bifida MS, things that have a lot to do with you developing your nervous system as well, fall underneath there. And as this goes further, I have broken all these down into categories that I'm going to talk about on a weekly basis to kind of, learn as well as teach. So then the next one we have is bipolar and related disorders. Bipolar, from the way I understand it, is when people have like manic depressives. Sometimes multiple personalities can kind of fall underneath that a little bit, schizophrenia. Um, Anxiety disorders and stress related disorders, I'm going to combine those two because basically PTSD is a stress related disorder, and also an anxiety related disorder. You have somatic symptom disorders. That one I really wasn't too clear on. So as we get along further, I'll have a better definition of it. But eating disorders are like things like bulimia, and anorexia nervosa, and overeating, being overweight, eating things like that you're not supposed to eat, like clay, cans, wood, paper, plastic, things like that. That's a disorder. You have sleeping disorders, insomnia, and believe it or not, insomnia is a very prevalent disorder, and people who have insomnia tend to have other mental disorders because of the fact that they can't sleep. So it causes an issue with judgment. It causes issue with learning. It causes an issue with mood. So it can kind of run over into other mental disorders. You have disruptive disorders. Disruptive disorders fell under kids who need like to take like Ritalin in school, who they claim. It can also fall under ADHD because when children aren't learning, or they don't feel like they fit in, they do things to get attention, and they consider that to fall under disruptive disorder. Stealing, crime is a disruptive disorder. Criminals normally have those characteristics. Um, Depressive disorders, depression is huge. Depression is huge with Black men. Depression is huge with our women, and depression has become a huge benefactor with our children. Then we have the substance related disorders, which drug use, drinking alcohol, um, using different things to make you feel better. You have the neurocognitive disorders, which also go back to kind of the neurodevelopment disorders. Those two kind of go hand in hand. Obsessive compulsive disorder is hoarding. Hoarding is falls underneath that, and also having to have your house super clean. An example that I found with this one is like, you know how you had to make sure that your clothes are out before school, and you took your shower and you took your bath and everything was done, dishes were done and stuff like that. And even though that's how we have structure, you have people who are very excessive about it, like the mommy dearest scene, if anybody's ever seen that, where she beat the child with the hanger, or other situations that we could come up with, like Precious. That was a kind of a movie that kind of had a lot of things to do with mental illness. Then we have personality disorders, which also go back to bipolar disorders as well, because you can have schizophrenia, multiple personalities, and other personality disorders, which I'm going to mention when we get to that point. And I have them all broke down. So those are two examples that I can give you, though. So that's pretty much covering all the disorders right now.
What is the possibility of a person having all of these mental disorders?
I'm going to say that the possibility is high, because if, like, for example, earlier, like if you have insomnia, you're not getting a lot of sleep. So, you need sleep. So if you have insomnia, you're not getting a lot of sleep, it's continuous. It could carry over into you being moody, which could be then diagnosed supposedly as having bipolar disorder. Or you could become depressed because you're not getting enough sleep. Your body's not getting enough rest. So they can kind of feed off of each other, and you can have PTSD and have insomnia. Because if you know, like, for people from Vietnam, my uncle was in the Vietnam War, and for a long time he could not sleep at night. He was just up constantly, and so they diagnosed him with having PTSD later on. But he also was diagnosed as having bipolar disorder. He also became abused substances, was drinking like cough syrup. That's what they used to do at that time. Um, Stuff like that. So they kind of, one can lead to the other. They're like stair steps, in my opinion. I could be wrong, but just from observing things that happen in my family and just other people, I can say that they can be stair steps. You can have a multitude of disorders and not even know it.
Yeah, I understand.
So, all right. Hold on, let me trying to see if I can see that one. Can you make that one a little bit bigger, Carrie, so I can read it?
That's it.
I'm sorry. Or, I'll pull it up. I'll pull it up another way. Hold on. Okay, that's good. That's cool. Okay, so basically, I wanted to go through the history of mental illness in our community, and I'm using the term Black loosely, just to kind of explain, because I know that we are an Indigenous community, but because of the way that we've been categorized, this is why I'm using it this way. So basically, mental health, of course, has been in existence since humans have been on the planet. But for us, it hasn't been, and it hasn't been something that we talked about. We were just kind of given the hand of, well, this happens, you deal with it, and that's it. We don't care how you feel. If you don't do what we want you to do, you know what it led to, from some of the stories that we question, but from the stories that we've heard, you kind of it didn't matter, if we go like through like things like a medical apartheid, you can tell it didn't matter. We were kind of used as the guinea pigs. So during that time in the 1700s, a lot of the doctors were saying that basically that our ideas that the idea that we could have mental health issues was kind of preposterous. But they did write down, or come up with a few things. And like in basically about the 1800s, you had a doctor by the name of Dr. Benjamin Rush. It was during the American Revolution that he came up with this idea, and he disagreed with another doctor by the name of John Galt. Basically, they said that there was like an absence of mental illness in Black slaves. When he wrote about the enslavement, the enslaved suffering from the abnormal behaviors, he came up with something called negritude. And basically he described nigritude as being the desire for blacks to become white. So I started taking this, Carrie, and you guys, and started looking at things that are going on in society today. So I would say like a form of nigritude would be like women who bleach their skin. What are they trying to do? Become lighter. So they created a name for this wanting to become white, but it also, can fall under the stipulations of colorism because you want to be lighter. So that's basically how he described that. Also, they said that since becoming white could only be accomplished by missegregation, Rush argued against interracial relationships as well, between the races, ensuring that nigritude would not spread beyond the black population. While there was no indication that he ever treated anyone for this disease that he made up, he noted one of the writings that the Africans become insane soon after they enter upon the poles of perpetual slavery in the West Indies. So in this part, he's only talking about one group of people that were taken to the West Indies. He's not, I'm incorporating us into this because eventually the wave of slavery came about. But anyway, Carrie, we were discussing this earlier and you brought up some valid points.
Oh yeah, what the term African is. So a lot of us think African is just a term that the people call themselves. And when you look at other people's history, you have to see, what do the people who are being written about, what do they have to say? And when you read about the people who live in Africa, one thing that you'll notice off the bat is those people don't speak English. They don't write with Roman characters. This is one way to change yourself against yourself, because you're reading what somebody else says about you. The term Africa came out because Africa was colonized by the Romans, by the Roman army. And the general who colonized them name was Scipio Africanus. It's kind of like if you say you live in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. was named after some dude named George Washington, or some of these other cities and towns and these counties that are named for the people who came over here and colonized you. We, not knowing our language, not knowing basically nothing, we start calling ourselves that, like Africans. When Africanus went over there to Africa and wiped out Tunisia and that part of the world, he named the land after himself, because that's what they do. Look at all these parks, look at all these counties. They name them after themselves. And they name the people after themselves too, because the people become they hoes. I mean, that's just simple how it is. We get it, and we think that these people sprang up out of nature. They didn't. People came and named these people that. So, but what an African was, and what an African was at that time, an African was a slave. An African was a person named after, it's still like that today. That's not the, so when they took the women and the men from America and took them down to the West Indies and took them away from their home and brought them back, they came back Africans.
And that's a form of what he just described as being nigritude.
Yeah, they came back as Africans. They didn't have they weren't in the choice of naming themselves and all that. So a lot of times we think in our thinking, we think we know what we're talking about. A lot of times we're about 500 years behind what the people we're talking about are. Those people didn't call themselves Africans. They were named Africans. And to me, quite frankly, that's part of the mental issue too. Calling yourself not what you are, calling yourself what somebody else is referred to you as.
I mean, it's like there's a saying that I'm always seeing that James Baldwin supposedly said, right? And I it's something to do with, to be African American in America means that you're angry. I can't remember exactly. I'm sure someone out there knows it. But here the thing that bothers me about it is that, for one, James Baldwin passed away before the term African American was coined by, in 89. I think he died in 86. And so they've taken something that he said about to be Negro and conformed it to something so that it can be benefited or utilize the African American ideology. And I
Yeah.
think that's wrong, because I saw somebody posted on Instagram, and I know this is kind of off the subject, you guys, but it made me kind of go, wait a minute, he didn't say that, because he wasn't even alive when that happened, when that came about. But they've manipulated it and using it for the benefit of the media or whatever, and it's wrong because that's not what he said at all.
So
So
those people who do that, that's called, they're revisionist historians.
mm-hmm.
Because you'll see, and that's a nice point you brought up, because that's what James, that this is a more recent case that we have to deal with. Like you say, when he was coming up, the term African American wasn't even used. It was like
Right.
what you said, Negro. So now we move ahead, think we're learning something, we're not, and we're ascribing words that he never even said to him.
Yeah, we're giving him ownership of something that he did not do.
So what? So is that
a mental illness? Yes. Yes, in fact, in one of the things, in one of the chapters that I have created, it talks about something called dissidence amnesia or dissonance amnesia or something like that. And I'm definitely going to hit upon that, because I think culturally and as a community, we suffer from that. And what that is basically you forget who you are. In order for you to survive, your brain goes into this mode where you forget the trauma, you forget the history, you just put it to the side, your brain locks it away. And I want to talk about that, but that's in the future. But I just brought it up because we're kind of talking about it right now. And I think as a community, as a culture, as a people, that we all suffer from that, because it's like, very few of us actually know that we are indigenous or American Indian. So it's just kind of like, how do we forget that? Where did it go? And it's because it's been replaced by us being African American. And so I think that that's a major part of mental illness, and the fact that they kind of knew what this was and knew what it was going on when it was being done.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can see that.
So okay. Well, I'll keep in order, you guys. I'm not going to go all over the place. So the next one we've got is something called drapetomania. And this one was created by a doctor by the name of Dr. Samuel Cartwright, a pro-slavery physician who worked with enslaved people in Louisiana. Argued that severe whipping was the typical and the best treatment for both of these conditions. Cartwright and others reported that drapetomania or I can't read that. I'm sorry, you guys. You see the word, we're going to skip over it, were often accompanied by skin lesions, which historians now argue that were like scars from whippings. In other words, these physicians failed to recognize the connection between the emotional states of the enslaved and the treatment they recommended for their conditions. So basically, they're saying that you suffered from this if you wanted to run away. If you didn't want to be a slave, you had this mental illness. The fact that you aren't supposed to be a slave never came about, or was never a thought apparently, but you didn't want to be a slave, you suffered from drapetomania. And how to solve this was to beat you, or split you with horses, torture you, and do all the other stuff that I've heard has been done.
Okay, so if you guys see how this guy is dressed, this is definitely a picture from the 17 or 1800s or something.
Mm-hmm.
And we still in these mindsets to this day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's a question down here. Let me see what it says. Hold on. I'm going to answer this question on here because from what I understand, John Blocker asked Carrie, I'm just going to kind of interrupt and stop for a minute. He said, I have one question, and it's do any or all of these disorders could be caused by a chemical imbalance within the brain? And that is something else that I am going to address as we go further through this. I personally believe, because I've been looking at how foods how our nutrition also affects our our mental health. And I'm going to have to say yes, that I do feel that there is a chemical imbalance caused by the brain. You got to think about this for a minute. If you don't have proper nutrition, like you have a mother, for example, I'll use a mom. You have a mother and she's like 3 months pregnant. She doesn't go to the doctor because maybe she doesn't have health insurance, whatever. She's not taking, she might not be taking prenatal vitamins or even eating along the lines of getting all the nutrients that she needs for her baby. Maybe she's eating Cheetos, drinking those little jug juices, eating candy, not eating any fish, which help develop the brain, not eating any vegetables, not eating properly. So that child, even though on the outside, the baby, oh, the baby's healthy, the baby's 10 pounds, whatever, the development of the brain could be hindered because of her diet or the fact that she could be drinking lead-based water or things like that. So I'm going to say that, yes, that mental illness can be caused by imbalances within our body and within our brain.
Glenn Franklin says you're complimenting Bobby Wright and Menticide. So that's a big pat on the back.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I really do.
So a lot of these conditions we see, they sprang from like over 200 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And as I go along, it's like we've been a huge experiment. It's and they're still doing it. They're still doing it. With you guys, with this election stuff, they're still doing it. And they every single time you turn around, I've noticed this pattern. They use Black women all the time. All the time. Black women saved the day. Black women voted the most. They prey upon Black women. And then when the repercussions hit, then they turn around and they blame the Black women. I want you guys to think about that for a minute. Okay. So we're on the next one, right? Let's see. That was the Civil War. Okay, so we're going to talk about mental slavery during the Civil War. And the Civil War freed nearly 4 million enslaved people across the South, it's claimed. It did not, however, lead to more enlightened attitudes about the treatment of African Americans or Indigenous Americans with mental illness. In 1895, Dr. T.O. Powell, the superintendent of the Georgia Lunatic Asylum, observed an alarming increase in insanity and consumption, which is also tuberculosis, among Blacks, and he stated it is attributed to the decades of freedom. Powell argued that the former slaves got their freedom. It caused them to have little or no control over their appetites and passions, and thus lead to excessiveness and vices, which turned and generated kind of insanity and other mental illnesses. Like medical experts before him, Powell did not factor in the socioeconomic conditions, including poverty, racial discrimination, and other looming specters of violence, lynchings, rape, things like that happened during that period of time to these free people. And this was also, inflicting upon mental issues, because if you happen to go outside after, and you see that your father is hanging from a tree, you would have some issues. And I don't understand why that's not understood, but this is basically them studying us like lab rats. So let's see. Carrie, did you have anything on that one?
No. So when they say Powell argued that the former slaves got their freedom, it caused them to have little or no control over their appetites and passions. So what kind of appetites to nobody who have nothing have? How could they have no control over it if they don't have it?
Well, okay. You know how there was a lady, I think I sent you the video, but the lady was talking about how because of the fact that there was no work in certain areas, that men would leave their families and go to another part of the country and work and then have families there. So they started to apply this into to our sexuality. They started to say that we don't understand birth control. This is how this is going to lead to the next subject that I've got, you guys. So, see, hold on, what? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I was reading this statement. So you guys know how like so they had families in other places, so they started saying that we did not know how to utilize birth control. They were having children left and right, not understanding that these people were having children because they needed hands to man land, because they were now they had to grow food to sell, and get pennies on the dollar for it, as well as to feed their families. So the only way to have a lot of people working on that little lot of land that they took from you, then gave back to you in little bits and pieces, is to have a family, to have children, because you couldn't go out and enslave anybody to work the land for you. You had to create your own workforce, and that's why that you had the large families, because you needed the hands, you needed the people, you had to have the children to have help work the land. That was it. That's it. But they took it another way and said we didn't know how to maintain birth control. We didn't know how to control our sexual urges. We didn't know how, people started, a lot of people started drinking and partying, and the juke joint started after this period too. But they had bars, so they had little bars as well. So that culture, even though it was developed in the more adept society, or the white culture, I'll say, when it got down to our culture, it was a problem. It was a mental issue, and this is where those stipulations come from.
Oh, okay. All right. So, I just noticed in writing like tuberculosis. So if you go back into the early part of the 1900s,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people were dying of tuberculosis. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, they were young people. They were in their 30s.
Mm-hmm.
They were dying of tuberculosis. So when they say they were dying of consumption, I'm thinking that that's meaning they were just eating too much,
Well,
or
I think
eating, or being poisoned with what they ate.
Yes, I think that the tuberculosis thing was like the Tuskegee experiment, in my opinion. I'm still researching to find some answers on it, and I wrote someone down south to see if I could get some more answers. But I think that it was like that because I also looked at W. Du Bois and Mary Bethune, I believe was her name. Correct me if I'm wrong, you guys. But I was reading something about how they were Black eugenicists. They wanted to control the slave population because they felt that if slaves had big families, that we would have a huge problem, because that you would have a whole bunch of uneducated blacks having babies, and then the babies would then be uneducated, and so forth. So they were also part of this thing that I'm going to talk about next too. They agreed with the eugenic theory because they wanted to control the black population, so that way they could, their reasoning was so they could go around and educate people so they could read and so forth and so on. But it wasn't taken that way.
You know what? None of them had any children, did they?
I'm sorry?
None of them had any children, did they?
I don't think so. I don't think that they had children. I think
Wow.
they were, like the good auntie and uncle.
You
So,
know what? I never really paid attention to them, in as far as history.
right.
You just brought up an excellent point.
Yep.
Okay, eugenics. Though we've been hearing a lot about eugenics a lot. What's the bottom line of eugenics?
Okay. So I'm going to go backwards. And so kind of from now to then, but I'll explain this in there as well. Okay. Everybody knows who Bill Gates is, right? Somehow, some way, Bill Gates is related to Margaret Sanger. Somehow. And the reason why, not only because of the fact that his father was on the committee of Planned Parenthood, and so was he, um, he's a eugenicist. Kind of, which is, something to do with the Georgia Guidestones as well, you guys, but we'll go into that another day. But basically, eugenics is a set of beliefs that practices to aim to improving genetic quality of human population. Basically, by doing that, what they meant by that is that they wanted to exclude us. They didn't feel like we were the cream of the crop. So basically, that's what eugenics is, saying that only people who are purebred Caucasian or white or lighter skinned or the most intelligent of your ethnicity will be allowed to breed and have children, because you'll produce sound human beings, is what basically this is saying.
So what is the effects of eugenics today? How are we dealing with eugenics today, or where does it pop up into the culture?
Well,
besides these abortion clinics.
Okay, well, the way eugenics pops up into the culture is, besides the abortion clinics, you also have the abortion pill, which you can take after, after after you have intercourse, and if you happen to think you're pregnant, you end it. That's it. So also the kidnapping of the children is a form of eugenics too. The abundant amount of hormones that are placed into our diet, and the growth of homosexuality in our community is a form of eugenics, because people who are homosexual aren't having children.
How does that skip? How do we don't see that? I don't get that. Of all the things that because they're trying to pump that homosexuality thing in our communities real big, and we're just going la 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 for it. How don't we see the dangers of that?
Honestly, I don't know. I mean, I just kind of look at it from this standpoint of the fact is that if you want to control a population, apparently this is what you do. And so there's a scientist, I can't remember his name, but he actually did a test on some frogs, and he was feeding them something that we have in our diet on a regular basis. And the frogs were morphing into females. They were male frogs, but they kind of morphed into female frogs. The hormones from it did that. So I think that the acceptance of this is, in the community, is due to the influx of it being just pushed continuously. Because if you go back, historically, Greco-Roman history is very homosexual. I mean, the church, very homosexual. And I mean, and I'm not, whatever what you choose to do in your personal life, I'm not judging you. I don't just want that to be understood. But if you look at history from Rome, Greece, and that era of society, as well as the church, is very homosexual. It's written. That's something that was strongly believed in. In fact, you guys watch Orion Daystar. He talked about this in one of his shows, where he was saying how the men, when they would marry a woman, is that they would shave the woman's head so she would look like a male, and they would have sex with her just to get her pregnant. But mostly they slept with the other boys. They didn't really deal with their wives. So an island of Lesbos was created because the women, and the lesbians were created because the women would go to this island and they would sexually please each other on the island on their little vacation. And that's how the lesbian community started at that time, because of the fact that the men really were only dealing with women for procreation, and that was it. There wasn't a lot of relationships like we have today, the heterosexual relationships we have today.
So you say we're
sexual, and they could, you have a lot of, as they talk about, in the closet brothers and sisters, I'm sure, but basically that's what happens. And then because of that behavior, and them knowing that this behavior has been influenced into our community, then what do? They release sexually transmittable diseases into that community. And so now the man who is having a relationship with another man, but also has a wife or a girlfriend, is sleeping with the both of them, and that's passed from one to the other. So basically, it's you create an umbrella of deceit and also disease from that, not only with mental illness, but also with the physical illnesses and the sexually transmitted illnesses as well. And you also decrease the population of the people that you are trying to get rid of. You start controlling it more.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's something I don't get. I don't understand how we don't see this. I don't understand how we think having sex in the butt even smells good. You think, no, seriously, you think about a woman you think of how she smells and she has perfume on and she's, smelling how she looks and now you doo-doo chasing. I don't get it. I don't
You
get it.
if if all you have to do is really, if you really want your answers in regards to that, is look at the animal kingdom. Look at lions and tigers, and yes, they all have some really quirky tendencies. But if you look at the animal kingdom, they don't have none of this going on.
Right.
So,
Okay, so this guy right here, Francis Galton.
uh-huh.
I mean, look at him.
Yeah.
And he's
Yeah.
telling us, and he's in control of what we do and what we say about ourselves.
Yep. He is the creator of eugenics, and he did not believe that we were equal to their ethnicity or their race. So he created eugenics to help control the African American, whatever, indigenous population, the black population, the slave population, because it was, they were afraid of what eventually happened anyway. What happened was, at the time of letting the slaves go, we developed towns, right? Our town, they knew that if we developed towns, if we were able to do this, that we would outpopulate the population. Plain and simple. And so the town, like, Oklahoma was bombed because it was doing so well that what happened? It got destroyed. Rosewood, the town in New York, and other towns that we started again. So eugenics was a part of the plan to help prevent that. And that's why they went through and they opened up the Planned Parenthoods in our neighborhoods, in areas that is accessible by us as well.
I mean, I just don't see us taking directions from cats who look like this.
Well, when intimidation is a tool that is used versus anything else, because they did a lot of things that were intimidating, in lynching, forcing you to do things that you didn't want to do, forcing you to have hysterectomies when you didn't know you were having a hysterectomy because you were trusting the doctor. People, that happened a lot. You had situations like Henrietta Lacks and Fannie Lou Hamer, where her uterus, she had a complete hysterectomy and wasn't made aware that she thought she was going to the hospital for something else. And so they preyed upon people who weren't as educated as they should have been. And on the flip side, that's what Mary Bethune and W. Du Bois were trying to prevent, they claim, but it all ended up being a panhandle under being able to control the population.
I'm starting to really see what these people were about. All these people they give us that were supposedly good for us. And when you really look at them, like you just brought up the Mary McLeod Bethune, she never really interested me as far as history. But now what you're saying, because I'm understanding how these colleges are coming up under, these colleges are put together by people like Francis Galton and the people with money giving these colleges all this money to start these societies.
Yes.
And they go to these schools and pick out what they want.
I mean, it's interesting because I'm reading what Brandon said, and he said the ongoing push for our women to be educated has greatly controlled the population of our people. Most girls I know around my age that have more than one child don't have a college degree. And you are 100% correct. You know what? Because I'm going to tell you guys, I have 9 kids. 9. When I say that, people go, "What?" No, I have 9 kids, 6 boys, 3 girls, and I don't have a college degree. I've been to college. I have enough debt for it, but I don't have a college degree. That is very true. That statement is very true.
So when you say you have 9 kids, what you say, people look at you like, whoa, like 9 kids.
Yeah.
What is that from? Because I think, well, what the average African American thinks, they don't really think of kids too much. That's why abortion is so easy.
Mm-hmm.
But I just wonder sometimes, do we think, what if we were the fetus that's getting aborted? What will we think about it then?
Mm-hmm.
Because when we don't have no responsibility for life, we really don't care about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so the women that have a lot of kids and the guys that have a lot of kids, I got to give it to them, because at least you help keeping us in the game with
Right.
life, you
Right.
know. And that's what I'm saying. We look at life real fucked up.
Yeah, I get a lot. I like when I say that. So, and I get this, how many baby daddies do you have? I don't have any baby daddies. I don't, what? You know, so
Right,
but that has to go back to mental illness, and that has to fall under the cognitive dissonance and self-hate.
right.
So, and one of the things that I want to mention that you mentioned about abortions too is this, you guys, is that they put Planned Parenthoods and other abortion clinics and opportunities for that to happen in our neighborhoods. And so it's accessible for young girls who are, however they ended up pregnant, to go and have an abortion. And I mean whether it was consensual or non-consensual or whatever. And when you go in, they count you. Hey, another person, a Black person, is having an abortion. There's a tally. And so they tell us, oh, more Black women have more abortions than anybody else, right? So we kill more Black people than anybody, right? That's what they tell us, right? So my mom is a registered nurse, and I brought this up to her, and she said, no, 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 Nikki, that's not true. And I was like, okay, explain. Well, when you have money and you have good insurance and you're pregnant and you don't want it, you can go to your personal obstetrician or gynecologist and have a abortion, but they would call it or falsify it as a DNC. A DNC is when your baby has passed away and within you have a stillborn and they have to get the baby out if you're not able to give birth. So so these women are having abortions that are wealthier in better social situations, and they're calling them DNCs, so they're not counted against them. And so that's how in the media and in other forms we're manipulated to believe that we are causing more harm to ourselves, even though in other areas we do. But in this one, I have to say that that is an unfair and biased statement, because white women, Mexican women, Asian women have just as many abortions as Black women, if not more.
Yeah, but shouldn't but all that health, shouldn't we be taking care of ourselves instead of always putting it in somebody else's hands? So we never know the information and what's going on with us. Shouldn't we be coming up with our own, how we
Yes, we
regulate
should.
things amongst ourselves?
Yes, we should. We should. We definitely, that's something that's important. Going to proper nutrition of pregnant women. I mean, and not a government program, because though WIC is very helpful for a lot of people, formula is one of those things that I'll tell you that is not good for children. It's not good for babies. I breastfed all my kids, not to put my information out there like that or have you guys think I'm weird, but I breastfed all my children. And when I went to WIC and said I'm breastfeeding, they give you a breast pump and you can pump your milk and you don't have to buy any formula. So it's like, if you don't want to breastfeed, you can still pump your milk and give it to your baby. But because they don't tell you these things, you got to ask these questions. People jump to that. So it's just like, if we have a lack of education in our community, and we need to change that. We need to develop or create more systems where we can have Black obstetricians and gynecologists and pediatricians, instead of, once again, trusting them, because even though we're all human, and as people claim, is that we're different. Our DNA is different. The way things react to our bodies is different. We're different, and we need to understand that and start engulfing that we're different and treating ourselves for the things that work with us. We have a lot of people. We have like the Dr. Savies, even though that's for the I keep talking about Honduras and the region that he grew up in. He still makes a lot of valid points. Dr. Layla Africa, Dr. Queen Afua. I'm trying to think of some other people that I know of. Herbalist, holistic doctors. Researching yourself. There's a lot of things that we can use that are meant for us, that are not that do not work for everybody. And we've been so sidetracked that, the prenatal vitamins that we're taking, maybe they aren't good for us. Maybe they have chemicals in them which cause delayed brain development. We won't know that because we're trusting other people with our health. And in a lot of us don't take the time to say, hey, what's in this? Or what's the side effect of this? We just take it because, the great doctor said take it, it's good for you. And a lot of the things that our health is bad for, like diabetes and high blood pressure, hypertension, stroke, and things like that, are preventable by changing your diet. It just takes eating more fruit, fresh fruit and vegetables, and it unfortunately it's not as accessible in our some of our areas, and we need to change that. We need to make it accessible. Those are areas of opportunity for business growth for us, is to create stores that we can get fruit and vegetables and nutritious foods to our people.
I see. I hear exactly what you're saying in this, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm reading about this Francis Galton cat.
Mm-hmm.
This cat, his whole movement was about wiping out the black population
Yes.
through
Yes, it
selective
was.
breeding and sterilization. So that's still in full effect to this day, right?
Yep. Yes, it is. He passed it on to Margaret Sanger, and she passed it on to, I believe, grandson, nephew, somebody, but Bill Gates is related to this woman somehow. And that vaccination they're talking about is a form of eugenics.
So okay. So we hear.
Mm-hmm.
So are you saying that the so-called African American voting this regime in that is talking about all the things we're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
like because we're talking about us wiping out the black race here in America, the
Mm-hmm.
African American here, is what the African American did. How was that helping to those ends?
It's not. Okay. It's really not, because if you think about this, okay, from what I understand, and quote me, you guys, if I'm wrong, or correct me, please. When with Donald Trump being president, he removed us from NAFTA. I learned this today. He removed us from the World Health Organization, so that way we couldn't get the vaccination, and some other organizations as well. Well, from in now with Joe Biden coming back in office and Kamala Harris, they're going to put us back into those situations that we were taken out of, so we didn't have to deal with the consequence from the vaccination. That was the reason why Donald Trump withdrew from WHO. And so now with him being out of office, whether you agree, whether you disagree, I don't care. I'm just bringing this up and saying this. Now we're going back into the organization. So now they're saying that we should have a vaccination by April. Excuse me. So, and Bill Gates is kind of in charge of that.
No, what I'm talking about on the
Oh,
aspect of mental health,
oh,
being
I'm
that
sorry.
being on that aspect of mental health.
Hmm.
What kind of mental health situation do we find ourselves in when the people who call themselves Black and African American vote for what's coming next? They cheer it on. They rah rah. Oh, we got rid of that. Now we gonna get this. What kind of mental health situation do those folks find themselves in?
I would say that that's going to fall under the category of being cognitively dissident, and I believe that has to do with like a dissociative disorder. In my opinion, I could be wrong, but I feel that that's where that would fall under, because you're basically signing a check for your own demise. That's saying, he's saying, here, there you go. Not let bring it on. We want this now. So I would have to say that it would definitely fall under that, because it's got to be a dissociative disorder, because anyone in their right mind would have looked at it from the standpoint that I brought up about Donald Trump, and they would have kind of did a little bit more investigating on their own before they went and just handed over their vote. But I'm not going to go into that because I have a whole different opinion, and I don't want to talk about that right now.
Okay, so who's this chick right here, Margaret Sanger?
That's Margaret Sanger is the creator of Planned Parenthood. If you notice, it says slaves, Latins, Hebrews, immigrants are human weeds and dead weight of human waste. Blacks, soldiers, and Jews are a menace to the race. You heard that, right? So she carried on from what Francis Galton and Charles Darwin and all those eugenicists believed.
But how is it done mentally to get the Negro to think about themselves like that?
Oh, they're impoverished, social, economically, nutritionally. I mean, when you're constantly being attacked in your in your home, like for example, I'm sure we've all seen images where people are hanging from trees, lynching, um, so forth. So these people who claim like they were kind of like missionary type of people would go out, and a woman would be pregnant, but she'd be poor, she'd be a sharecropper. You know, you really can't afford to have any more kids. We can help you if you get rid of this baby. So they preyed upon the fact of the social economic status and manipulated it and made him feel bad. And then that's what happened. And now, in some instances, I've seen or heard of people. And when I was going to school and doing my clinicals, a lot of young women use abortion as birth control instead of birth control, which is also not good for you, or abstinence. That's not a thing sometimes. And so, and of me, of all people talk, I have 9 kids, but nonetheless, um, it's preyed upon because of the fact that these women were poor, and they didn't, they used the fact that you have enough kids, and manipulation.
Yeah, I think trying to learn our culture from men who rather have homosexual lovers
Hmm.
as opposed to women who are having multiple children, which means there's a lot of love to go around.
Hmm.
I think we're going down the wrong path,
Right.
because this woman is saying slaves, Latins, and Hebrew immigrants are human weeds,
Hmm.
a dead weight of human waste. Blacks, soldiers, and Jews are menace to the race. And this was said in 1922. How don't most of us know this? How don't most of us, we know a little bit about this? How is that possible? How do we keep doing these things that falls right into these people's plans?
Because it's not something that's taught. We're taught completely opposite. We're taught to make it seem like this society is working for us, and they use token people in places, in my opinion, to do that, to feed that energy. I mean, when you have people like, we'll use like Jesse Jackson. When you have people who like who rename our whole entire ethnicity, and it's okay. Oh, we accept that. That's how, because you have people in place who look like us, who are not advocating for us, and they use that. Oh, you're welcome, Renzo. You're welcome.
Yeah, yes. So we'll go to the next slide.
Okay. Well, we kind of talked about the forced sterilization and stuff already, Carrie.
Okay.
But one of the things, let's see here, that was the thing where I was talking about Fannie Lou Hamer. But the next one was how people like that were said to have mental illness were placed into facilities, and they were lobotomized. Their brains were scrambled. They experimented on them. They did things to people who they claimed had mental illness versus treating it. And a lot of those beings were children.
I would suggest the listeners to check out John F. Kennedy's sister. He had a sister that they did some brain stuff on her and messed her up real bad. Also, too, there's a museum in Los Angeles called the Psychiatry Museum. I would suggest
Mm-hmm.
they have videos on it online. Psychiatry Museum in LA. It will blow your mind
Oh wow, I'm gonna check that
how,
out.
how they were psychologically dealing with people. Because remember, we live in an artificial construct. And so everybody's in this artificial construct is not gonna pick up what they picking up. People are natural people. They come from the earth. You can't set up a room on the earth and get the people into it. Although most of us are like that, some people just don't fit in. And man, they scrambled this girl's brains. Check out the Psychiatry Museum in LA on Los Angeles. I forget the street it's on, but it's one of the major streets. You can go online and pull up the Psychiatry Museum. It'll blow you
Okay,
away.
I'm gonna check that out. But so basically, I think we covered pretty much everything in regards to the beginning. So what I'm looking to do with this, you guys, is I'm gonna go over all the disorders as well. Now I do have the stigmas that come along with why we don't get treated for mental health, and you can pull that up, Carrie. Hold on. Let's see. Let me get to that one too, so I can see it. Yes, I apologize. Okay, so let's see here. Okay, so this one, in this area, I talk about stigmas and why we don't seek help for mental health issues as well as other issues. But one of the main things is because we don't trust the medical field with reason, because of the fact that you have the TB experiment and other experiments that have happened in the past, and so we don't reach out for help. It's also something that from the way I'm looking at it, and also being understood that that idea of what happens in this house stays in this house. um, we're
But,
also
but could
looking
that could that be like a saving grace? Because the number
at
of people, the number of people that don't, could that be saving a lot of us by not doing that?
yes, it could be, because we can't go to someone who can kind of have more empathy and compassion towards us, instead of going to someone who's going to experiment and give you a pill that's going to sterilize you. Why would you want to go? So it is what's saving us, and the fact that we don't have outreach centers within our community with people staffed who are us is a major benefactor as well.
Okay, well check this out. So this is what I be asking the Black Nurses Associations around. We have all these Black and African American things. I'm like, well, do you guys have these sort of things that we're talking about tonight?
Mm-hmm.
We're not into this medical stuff because they dog us out to this day.
Mm-hmm.
So shouldn't so people who are trained, and I'm thinking nurses, because nurses, they take care of people.
Mm-hmm.
There are some of the people, you can say what you want to say, but nurses take care of your ass when you're on your back.
Yep.
So I think that's a doable group to look at. Doctors too.
Mm-hmm.
All these brothers got to have places where we can go to and get help for some of these mental, situations we find ourselves in.
Mm-hmm. I mean, having the fact of feeling like you can actually go and talk to someone, or if with the COVID thing going on, you can call someone and talk to them. I'm going to do
Mhm.
some research and see if I can find some psychologists that are also from our community that are willing to maybe come on here and let me ask some questions so we can get some information like that. But I think that having people who look like us would be a benefit, especially when it comes to mental health, all aspects, but especially when it comes to mental health, because mental health in our community is not viewed as being normal. It's viewed
Right.
as and as embarrassing. And when it's mistaken when you can push aside your issues, then you're looked at as being strong or whatever, and that's not it, because you're just making it stagnant, and it's going to build up, and then you're going to have something else, and that's where you get the stair step disorders.
Right. Well, cool. Is that it?
That's it.
Okay. Well, look. So we're gonna bring this subject to you every week until we run out. We just went through the first part of it to just get you, acclimated what we're gonna be talking about. But the mental illness that's going on in the community is really kind of at an all-time high.
Mm-hmm.
You just seen the most Negroes, they help put what's coming down the pike to them. And us not being able to understand what we are doing and just doing stuff because we want to get pat on the head or scratched on the stomach or something, doing stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that, it only works for a few people for a very short time. But it does
Right.
it does a tremendous amount of damage to us on the long haul. So
I agree.
pay attention as people, as creations of this earth. You're a creation just like a nut is created on a tree, just like a pear on a tree, or orange on a tree. You are a creation like this. What you gonna do with it?
Right.
Mental,
You got to use it. We got a lot of things to fix. A
you got
lot.
things to pick, and your mental is just one aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
So don't let nobody tell you who you are. Don't let nobody tell you what you can't do. Because all they are putting them mental shackles on you. I don't care who it is.
Right. That's true.
Don't let nobody tell you who you are. Don't let nobody tell you nothing. You tell them. Let's try that for a change. As a group of people.
Exactly.
All these people that's out of the society, dude, create your own society. They'll be begging to get in. Nicole, I want to say thank you for joining us tonight, and I want to thank the audience for hanging out with us. So we're going to be talking about mental illness in the upcoming weeks because this is one of the things in our community we got to fix. We got to fix. So I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight, and we'll see you next time. Peace.
Have a good night, you guys.